DRS, new college basketball, AP Top 25 released yesterday. The AP poll on the men's side. Look at the top. Number 1, Auburn, who despite losing at home to Florida over the weekend, remains at number 1. I don't have an issue with that. Number 2, Alabama. These two teams set to play on Saturday in Tuscaloosa. Not just the Iron Bowl rivalry, now on the hardwood in basketball, but DRS, 1 versus 2 in the AP poll for the first time since November 2021 in men's college basketball. For the first ever time in SEC men's hoops history. A historic day ahead is what we are expecting Saturday afternoon in Tuscaloosa at Coleman Coliseum.
Yeah, throw up that graphic again, because let's analyze the SEC and what's going down, Ben. See that number 1 team? Tell me who that is. It's Auburn. Where they play, Ben? What conference?
The SEC.
Answer it. All right, number 2, Alabama. Where are we at?
The SEC.
Number 3, Florida. Where are we at? Number 5, where are we at? Tennessee. The SEC no longer a football conference? We got to love this. This is fantastic. Now, also, it's when we get to the conference tournament coming up, that'll be fun. Then the March Madness. Are we at the point now where you should say to the other guy, hey, the attrition in the Big 12, you beat each other up, you have nothing left in the gas tank by the time you get to the NCAA tournament? Nonsense. For sure. These teams are going to be sharpened by iron by the time they get there. We're buying the SEC this year in men's college basketball.
4 of the top 5 teams from the SEC. By the way, Tennessee plays Kentucky tonight. We'll talk about that in just a moment. 9 teams in the top 25 as well. Donnie, we had these debates, right, in the college football playoff, first year of 12. The idea of the SEC hypothetical power that did not really exist this season. You want to make that argument, though, in college basketball? I'll listen in 2024-25. As we look at the top 2 teams, Auburn suffered its first loss in SEC play over the weekend against Florida, who, by the way, has 2 wins against the number 1 team in the country this year, beating Tennessee earlier in January by 30. The Tigers still remain, and rightfully so, hefty favorite to win the SEC regular season crown, and still the favorites to win the national championship. But Alabama, plus 195, plus 165 to get back to a Final Four. Nate Oates turning Tuscaloosa into a basketball town. They see each other on Saturday. Again, it's just our 5th 1 versus 2 in the AP men's poll since 2013. Our first ever 1 versus 2 matchup in SEC men's basketball history. And Donnie, we'll get to Tennessee and Kentucky in just a moment. But with all the fanfare and the notoriety and the history at stake in a rivalry game on Saturday afternoon, both teams in action tonight and both on the road as slight favorites. Auburn heads to Vandy to take on the Doors as a 9.5-point favorite. And let me just track down the number for Alabama. 4.5-point spread in favor of the Tide on the road in Austin against Texas. If you have ever believed in the term trap game, that's what we have tonight.
We do. And Alabama has a very good matchup tonight at Moody. But the fact of the matter is they're going to play Saturday with that eye on the prize to get tripped up. That's a tough one to look. And that's one of those public specials there that you want to fade. I actually don't think so. I think Alabama wins tonight, to be honest. Still even with that look ahead.
Listen, Vanderbilt is having a great season. They have been ranked in the top 25 for the SEC Powers. Mark Byington, in his first year from JMU, has done a great job in Nashville. That could be close tonight. I do think the Tigers avoid an upset against Vandy. Top 15 tilt DRS, Tennessee and Kentucky inside a Rupp Arena. In the Vols, a 2.5-point road favorite. This is the best defense in the sport in Tennessee against the best offense or second best offense in college basketball in Kentucky, but they don't play a lick of defense. What do you see tonight in Lexington?
Let's keep it simple here. It is a road game, understand, but from Tennessee's perspective on offense, they love to shoot the three-point shot. Second in conference play at volume. You know who lets you shoot whatever three-point shot in any gym you want to play? It's Kentucky's defense. But then you flip it over to Tennessee, who will let you shoot that three-point shot, but also they're going to defend the heck out of it. Who makes more three-point shots that wins this game? I think Tennessee comes away with the prize, Ben. How about that?
I like that look, DRS. What a road win it would be for the Volunteers. Yeah. Quad 1 spot tonight. DRS, have fun on the money line. Enjoy the extra prep. Jon Rothstein here on TEL up next. Football season is now officially in the books. At the end of Super Bowl Sunday, a nation hoping for sports looked to one area and potentially one man above all else. They now start to look only in February, but getting ready for the month of March in college basketball, which means here on this Tuesday on the early line, we are very pleased to welcome on Jon Rothstein on behalf of the FanDuel Sportsbook, of course, doing incredible work for CBS Sports. Jon, I believe it was in the wee hours of Sunday night as the confetti fell in New Orleans as Philadelphia was crowned a new Super Bowl champion that you ushered out a message to all of America. What exactly did that say?
Just simply, Ben, that we are in a state of transition right now as a society, and we are about to now go on and undertake the greatest ride that we will have on the calendar year, and that is the lead up from now until Selection Sunday, which includes, obviously, all of championship week through the end of the NCAA tournament, which obviously is going to be highlighted by the highs and the lows of March Madness. But, Ben, you know as well as I do, this is only February.
It certainly is. Fewer than 5 weeks away from Selection Sunday, but a preview perhaps tonight with how great the Tuesday night docket is of what college basketball is at its best. We start in the Big Ten. Top 20 tilt in Ann Arbor. Number 20, Michigan, an ever so slight home favorite, Jon, against number 7, Purdue. We can see what the odds makers expect for how close this game is anticipated to be tonight in Ann Arbor. In your estimation, Jon, what is the matchup that decides the outcome tonight between the Wolverines and the Boilermakers?
Well, Michigan was non-competitive when the two teams played a couple of weeks ago at Mackey Arena. That was a 27-point win for the Boilers. But the thing that I'm looking at right now as Purdue has quietly won 11 of its last 12 games is the ancillary pieces in Purdue's rotation. We knew coming into the season that there were 3 constants for Purdue. Braden Smith, who's having a first-team All-American type season, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Wren, who's also performing like an All-American. Those 3 players were starters on last year's team that went to the national title game and lost to UConn. But then I'm looking in the weeds. I am looking at the performances over the last 2 games of CJ Cox and also Caleb Furst. Those 2 players over their last 2 games combined are combining to average 18 points and 14 rebounds together. Now, all of a sudden, we have a supporting cast. Now, all of a sudden, we have Purdue resurgent. And make no mistake about it, the Boilers don't have what they had when they had Zach Edey in the middle, the first player since Ralph Sampson at Virginia in the early 1980s to win back-to-back National Player of the Year honors in consecutive seasons. But with all that said, Purdue doesn't have what it had, but it still may have enough to get back to a Final Four.
And, Jon, I think it speaks to the testament that is Matt Painter in year number 20 to lose a guy like Zach Edey, a 2-time reigning National Player of the Year, and still be leading the Big Ten at this moment and ranked 7th in the country, 11-2, the conference mark for the Boilermakers. The team right behind them, Michigan State, who got back in the win column on Saturday. The Spartans at home tonight in East Lansing, hosting Indiana. Let's start with the game itself. How can, if at all possible, Jon, the Hoosiers keep this game competitive?
Well, for Indiana to have success, I think the one thing we need to see is a consistent flow on offense and, consistent floor spacing, which is going to coincide, obviously, with outside shooting. I think when you look at Indiana, when it played probably its best basketball in the Big Ten this season, it was because it went and downshifted into a smaller lineup that had Mackenzie McBacco at power forward. But look, I want to take a minute here, Ben, and I just want to do a little bit, of a deep dive and break out the fine-tooth comb when we look at the history of Indiana basketball. Indiana has been to the second weekend of the NCAA tournament 4 times since 1994. Indiana, if you look at the coaches that have been there since Bob Knight, nothing has ever been good enough. Mike Davis went to 4 NCAA tournaments in 6 years. He was asked to go. That included a trip to the national title game in 2002. Kelvin Sampson was removed from his post after a couple years, after obviously he broke NCAA rules, which obviously in typical NCAA fashion, shortly thereafter were ruled legal. Then Tom Crean, 3 Sweet 16s, 2 outright Big Ten regular season titles. And in his last year, Indiana was 13-6 with wins over Kansas and Carolina when OG Anunoby tore his ACL. There was an appetite for change. They went and they hired Archie Miller, who was the hot young coach on the rise. He didn't go to the NCAA tournament. So they wanted somebody who could make the NCAA tournament and bring back, obviously, the gap that existed between Indiana and its fan base. Mike Woodson then followed somebody who didn't go to the NCAA tournament, won a game the first year in the first 4 against Wyoming, won a game in his second year against Penn State, and now all of a sudden he misses last year, and this year this is a team again that's still probably 5, 6, 7 spots away from Dayton, and the school opts to force him out in mid-February. So my question is this: why all of a sudden, if those are the facts, is Indiana such a great basketball job? And why would somebody who is currently in a great situation in a power conference want to leave that to go to the fishbowl? And as I say, and I've said it before, I'll say it again, just 4 trips to the NCAA tournament second weekend since 1994.
It's the prestige and the history in Bloomington inside Assembly Hall, perhaps. If this does not result in an NCAA tournament trip for IU, John, that would be 6 times in the last 8 big dances, missing out on the field of 68 for Indiana. Some history tonight, perhaps, for Tom Izzo. 2 coaches in Big Ten men's basketball history have won 353 conference games. Izzo and Bob Knight. With 1 more tonight, Tom Izzo stands alone by himself. Quickly here, John, top 15 tilt in the SEC tonight. Interrupt. Tennessee, a 2.5-point favorite against Kentucky. The Vols have the most efficient defense in the country. The Cats, second most efficient offense in the country. What wins tonight in Lexington?
Guard play for Tennessee. If Ziegler, Lanier, and Meshack can control the game, I like Tennessee on the road. And I think Tennessee, again, much like Houston in the Big 12, is flying under the radar. And, Ben, isn't it ironic, not to quote Alanis Morissette there by chance, that Rick Barnes and Kelvin Sampson had all those wars against each other? They were in Texas and Oklahoma. Don't you think?
Maybe coming more so in March. John, thank you. More on the early line next. What a Tuesday night we have in college basketball. Jon Rothstein set the stage for it. It's often difficult when you highlight only a few games with John and we only get about 8 minutes. It would be great to have 80 minutes to preview every game around the country. And, you know, the walking encyclopedia of college hoops knowledge, Jon Rothstein, would be able to do so. But there are so many games we could choose to preview. We highlight a few. We talked about Big Ten history at stake tonight. If Tom Izzo and Michigan State win, Tom Izzo stands alone by himself for the most conference wins in Big Ten men's basketball history, 354. He got 353 over the weekend for MSU, doing so back at home after a 2-game slide for the Spartans on the road in the West Coast, a second-half rally against Oregon. There's some beautiful irony, perhaps, in that, right? A new change for Indiana again, trying to replicate the success in Bloomington that Bob Knight had, 353 Big Ten wins for Bob Knight, and Tom Izzo could surpass Bob Knight after matching the record with a victory against the Hoosiers tonight. Just thought I would mention that. Elsewhere around the country, of course, in the SEC, each and every night, you're going to have so many top 25 matchups. We talk top 15 tilt inside Rep Arena, top 25 tilt in Stark Vegas, Mississippi State against Florida. Now, the Bulldogs got off to a great start this year. 14-1, perfect 2-0 beginning in the SEC, but have dropped 5 of their last 8, remaining, though, in the top 25. Florida has its second win of the year against the top-ranked team in the nation, knocking off Auburn on the road on the Plains on Saturday afternoon. The Gators tied for the 3rd best team in the country alongside Duke in the recent AP Top 25. In Florida, an ever so slight favorite on the road tonight against Chris Jans and his Bulldogs. So, second win for Florida against number 1 this year. What did they do in the aftermath of the first victory against number 1 earlier in January? When they hammered Tennessee at home by 30, they went on the road a few days later against Arkansas and won that game comfortably, covering as a 5.5-point favorite. The Gators have a chance to follow that road success tonight. Again, we had talked about the 1 versus 2 for the first time ever in SEC men's basketball history this upcoming Saturday in Tuscaloosa. Number 1 Auburn, number 2 Alabama. The rivalry intensified. But before we get there, we've got 2 games on this Tuesday night for both of the top 2 teams in the country. Auburn, 9.5-point favorite against Vandy. The Commodores playing some really good basketball this year under Mark Byington. Texas starting to figure it out under Rodney Terry, only a 3.5-point favorite. Now 4.5-point favorite in the updated number, hosting Alabama tonight. But boy, I mean, you want to talk look-ahead spots, trap game possibilities. Maybe the world has never seen bigger in college basketball, I'm sure they have, than perhaps what we have on this Tuesday evening. Keep an eye on Texas A&M. Back inside the top 10. The Aggies, 7.5-point favorite tonight against Georgia. It was A&M on the road in Columbia against Missouri over the weekend. Wade Taylor, the 4th in the final 10 seconds of regulation, burying a triple for the win. A&M plays relentless basketball under Buzz Williams. Going to be a team to trifle with come the NCAA tournament. And let's talk about Kansas State for just a moment if we can. They win the Sunflower Showdown at home in the Octagon of Doom in the Little Apple on Saturday against Kansas. K-State got off to an atrocious start this season under Jerome Tang after having a couple of big transfer portal signings, none more so than Coleman Hawkins, who came over from Illinois. They got off to a 7-11 start. From that point, Kansas State has won 5 in a row. Kansas State has covered in all 5 of those wins. Their last 3 outright as an underdog against Iowa State, Arizona State, Kansas. Kansas State has covered in 8 consecutive games, 6 of those 8 as a dog. They're getting 3.5 tonight against Arizona at home. Now the Wildcats playing great basketball as well under Tommy Lloyd. I'm hesitant to bet this at the moment, but I do want to because of how good K-State has been covering numbers. A number I did bet last night, Creighton, 2.5-point favorite, now 3.5 at home against UConn. The Blue Jays have won 9 in a row. There is no better cover team in conference play than CU this year. 11-1-1 against the spread. Wednesday, the early line returns. That's tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.